It never happens, but that shows our panelists and speakers are utmost ready. They're already on stage. So I will not call them on stage, but only mainly introduce the panel, just as Nicolas Guillermin is arriving. The panel is entitled Navigating the Space Cyber Regulatory Landscape from Policy to Operational Compliance. And we have here to moderate the debate Mr. Andrea Alberti, Cybersecurity Governance and Compliance Specialist at UniCredit Bank Austria AG. But you've had other experiences in the field. I will hand the microphone to everyone. And the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for attending this panel. So the first thing that I want to point out is that this panel won't be a legal. Yeah.
Hold it close to your mouth.
Okay. This panel won't be such a very strictly legal panel, but we would like to dig more into operational side and the policy side. So the context nowadays is that regulation is moving from a voluntary best practice to enforceable responsibility, and NIS2, which is entering into force in the next few months, already creates a broader cybersecurity framework with across 18th critical sector, and space will be involved in too. And we will have then the EU Space Act, which will introduce an harmonized framework around safety, resilience, and sustainabilities for space activities. Furthermore, space is no longer isolated from terrestrial critical infrastructure, and satellite connectivity, cloud operation, aviation, defense, and everything which is connected with national security is increasingly part of the same risk chain. So we can understand that, having said that, compliance is becoming operational. So it now affects procurement, engineering, incident response, supplier management, liability on the contractual point of view, governance, and the board level accountability, especially for NIS2. So today with me, I will have 4 guests from very heterogeneous origins and competence, which will help you to dig more into basically in this topic. Today's discussion will look especially to NIS2, the EU Space Act already said, national law and sector-specific requirement that affects operator, manufacturer, service provider, and customers. So the goal of today's discussion is to move from policy and legal concept to practical consequences. For instance, governance, contract, incident response, procurement, and risk allocation. So we will explore this through 4 perspectives, as already said. European policy with Mr. Nicolas Guillermin, legal expertise with Dr. Laetitia Cesari, aviation connectivity operation with Mr. Nick Goddard, and satellite security with General Thierry Bauer. So to start, I would like to ask each of you for a short opening view. From where you sit, what is the most important change currently happening in the space cyber regulatory landscape? So I would start with Mr. Nicolas. So from a European policy perspective, could you briefly take us through the evolution of this work, what has already been done at the EU level on space security and cybersecurity? What triggered the need for the EU Space Act, and what problem is it ultimately trying to solve? Fragmentation, resilience, strategic autonomy, market trust, or all of these at once? And please introduce yourself with a brief bio speech. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, thank you for the introduction. I'm Nicolas Guillermin. Actually, I'm quite familiar to this conference, but usually I come to explain what is the status and the state of play of IRIS². But I have another hobby in my life. Actually, I'm also, let's say, part of the team that was in charge of the establishment of the Space Act. So it's an honor for me to be there today, and especially in a legal panel. For an engineer like me, I say, actually, I'm really proud to be here today. So the question you were mentioning is so what is the what is the basis of the Space Act? So let me do a brief history of what we do in the European Commission in space. The first thing in space, EU is active for 20 years, and you know all about it. 2 decades with the space program, with Galileo, let's say a real program with a big budgetary impact, all about strategic autonomy. So basically, if you hear, let's say, space program is really about strategic autonomy, Space Act is not at all. It's not at all about strategic autonomy. It's really, let's say, what is complementary is the single market aspect. So on the cyber perspective, single market, we know it already. Let's say we have plenty of piece of legislation for the cyber market that comes from the EU, also comes from national. The masterpiece, of course, that impacted space heavily is, of course, the NIS2. So an NIS2, for those who do not know, so it's horizontal, it's space is heavily included, not only the operator, but also the manufacturer, the communication domain is completely included. But we say, having view of, let's say, what is the status of the NIS2, we identified at the European Commission level that actually the current NIS2, so the one which is under application today, suffer from many drawbacks that we wanted with the Space Act to fix. The first one is quite obvious. NIS2 is a directive. The directive needs to be transposed in every member state. And what is missing in the NIS2 directive is the most important piece for the industry and for the economic operator, what we call the baseline, but it's really easy to understand all the hundreds of rules that you need to apply if you want to do a good cybersecurity. They are not in the directive, so basically they must be in the transposition of the member state. So it ends up with 27 transposition, 27 set of rules that actually are different, but fulfilling exactly the same purpose, so protecting the industry and the companies and the operators. So the second problem that we wanted to address is the level playing field. NIS2 suffers gaps. Gaps in particularly, one of the most important is third state. So there is, let's say, if you are a third state in space, depending on what you do, you can escape from the NIS2. So we wanted to fix that. And finally, at the end, we wanted also to reach a certain level of simplification by ensuring that the rules are applicable, let's say, to a topic that makes the difference for the space missions. So including, for example, this concept of license that does not exist.
Okay, so it will be a great effort to coordinate all 27 countries, in my opinion, because we have a different regulation and everyone have different priorities as well. So another brief question to you, Nicolas. So Europe is increasingly promoting strategic autonomy and resilience across critical sectors, but operationally, many space services still rely on non-European cloud, for example, Amazon Web Service, Google Cloud, infrastructure, and globally distributed supply chains. So how difficult is to reconcile strategic autonomy ambitions with these structural dependencies, in your opinion? I know that it's very difficult.
No, it's very difficult, actually. Let's say, with a piece of legislation, you cannot do a lot of miracle. But I would say that we have, let's say, basically 2 lines to treat this subject. The first one is the space program, and actually being a representative of working heavily on IRIS², isn't IRIS², let's say, a program that actually try to solve a problem of dependency in Europe on the satellite communication market. The second, so you have other programs like this one. I mentioned actually the CHIP Acts, mentioning something that goes completely, is not really space related. Space program is that, and is really to solve the problem of strategic dependency on critical infrastructures. It takes time, clearly, to do it, and we cannot do it on everything. So in order to mitigate the risk, you will not find the answer in the Space Act, but you could find, let's say, a solution also in the Cybersecurity Act that just been out very recently, that provides a full chapter on what we call supply chain risk, and which is really there to protect against supply chain dominance position. So this is clearly, let's say, the purpose of this kind of piece of legislation.
Thank you very much. So I will shift now to General Thierry Bauer, and I would like to pose this question. So connecting to the operational point of view, which is your, experience, and then I kindly invite you to present yourself. So from your perspective, how has the threat landscape evolved in recent years with the growing convergence between cyber operation, space system, and geopolitical competition, most of all? Thank you.
So thank you. Very happy to be here to discuss a bit about the threat and the way a company like Eutelsat is trying to address this rising level of threat. I'm quite new in the space industry. I spent 30 years in the Air Force and the military, working in intelligence, and part of my life was dedicated to cyber. I was deputy commander of Cyber French Command, acting offensive, defensive, and in France. I now try to join the threat I observed in my past career with the specific topics of space. And what is quite easy to see is just to observe what is occurring over the planet currently. Try to use Starlink in Iran, for example. And there is no obvious that there is no peace in space. No peace anymore. It's not the spaceful use of space we aspire for years. It's no more a reality. There is a war in space. The obvious example is Starlink, but you have less visible attacks and effects everywhere in space. You have yes, physical threat with a satellite dedicated for attacks, for observation, and you have more or less visible cyber attacks, RF attacks, and you have to handle this new threat. And space is changing at the same time. It's no more the time to have a big geostationary satellite with a single geoportal, one satellite to protect. Now you have constellations, you have hundreds, thousands of satellites to defend. Satellites which are light, it's light satellites, it's not big one. If you just have a look on the OneWeb first generation, it's quite easy to protect. These satellites are mirrors. The signal is coming and going back without any treatment on board. When you are just observing on the next generation, on IRIS², for example, for more sensitive activity, now you have software on board. You can change. You have reconfigurable payloads, and the exchange are just rising. The treatment on board is rising. So you are opening door just to work on daily basis, and this door could be exploited by hackers, by state. And the second point, on geopolitical point of view, you know that space is an enabler. It's a military enabler, it's an economical enabler, and an industrial enabler, though it's a natural target. And all the states are just rising their capability to attack in the space. Cyber is a way. There are many other ways. So it's definitely a new world.
Yes. Thank you very much, General. So now let's shift to a more legal perspective with Laetitia. So I would like to pose this question to you. In your opinion, from a legal perspective, what is changing for companies? Are we moving from a world of recommendation and best practices toward a world of clearly attributable legal duties? And where do you see the highest legal uncertainty today? So scope of application, liability, contractual allocation of cyber risk, or the interaction between EU and national rules?
Thank you very much
please
for
introduce
your question,
yourself.
Andrea. And thank you very much to CYSAT for organizing such an important discussion today, and especially to Emna Amri for the organization of the panel. I think this is a point to raise as well. My name is Laetitia Cesari, and I work as a senior legal counsel for the law firm de Gaulle Fleurance. where we support the work of satellite operators, launching service providers, and various actors from the space industry. So to answer your question, I will just go back to history a bit and just remind the crowd that the placement of military assets in orbit has been made since the beginning of the space era with the placement of Earth observation satellites that supported military operations. In the 90s, the GPS was deployed by the United States and used to support military operations on the ground. So we've seen for many decades that space was kind of the screen where the projection of geopolitical tensions happening on Earth happen. And as a screen, it also was the field of experiment. And so we've seen more and more satellites deployed in low Earth orbit, first for observation and communication and all. And more we've seen the emergence of large constellations of satellites. So if we think of space changing as an environment to a certain extent, we have to really keep in mind what General Bauer just said. There is a strategic element in space operations. There is a strategic element in technologies deployed as large constellations, for instance. And this is not only about the placement of objects, it's also about the use of radio frequencies. So from a European perspective, space actors have seen this new reality and had to really anticipate what it meant for their business. And from a legal point of view, at the European Union level, it was extremely interestingly done, because when Ursula von der Leyen declared that there would be a legal framework applicable to space data and services in 2023, there have been some consultation with different stakeholders. So there have been a feedback survey where every single one person, legal entities or members of the civil society could participate and say about their thoughts and their opinion and the reality of their practice. And then when the European Commission published a first version of the text, there was a targeted consultation survey that circulated and that was open for a few months. So the lawmaking process is becoming very interesting because it involves a plurality of stakeholders, not only within the European Union, but also external stakeholders. And perhaps you've all seen that other states outside of the EU commented and gave their views on what they thought would be important for their own industry when it comes to the EU Space Act. So the lawmaking process is changing as well. And there is this back and forth between the different institutions, the Council, the member of the Parliament also making amendments. It's very interesting because they put their views out there and they try to do better every single time. And it takes time indeed. So from a law firm point of view, we try to anticipate what will be the best for the members of the space industry, for our clients basically. What should we put in the contract to anticipate what will be future risks and threats to their activities, not based on just one specific activity, but based on the nature of the entity we are talking about, based on the type of the space mission, based on the type of assets, because there is an increasing digitalization that was kind of described just now. Yeah. And we have to anticipate all of these points from a hardware and from a software perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will take the connection to the external stakeholders that you have mentioned, and I will give you the floor to Mr. Nick Goddard. And I ask you to introduce yourself, and I would like to ask you, from an operational perspective, how difficult is it today to implement effective cybersecurity controls across increasingly complex ecosystem composed of commercial technologies, third-party vendors, cloud providers, and interconnected infrastructure? So give us a brief review of these. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Morning, everyone. So my name is Nick Goddard. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at GOGO Business Aviation. So we handle about 10,000 corporate aircraft worldwide, and we also do government business both here in Europe, throughout the Middle East, and South America, and in the United States. So we have a pretty large blend between the commercial aspect and the government aspect, not just the military aspect. And so the way I'll phrase the question or reorient it is from a business perspective. Most of the time when a new regulation comes out, I'll be very pragmatic and direct just because I'm an American, and I'll just give you some thoughts that I have from the West perspective on what we do for regulation and then what happens globally. Most of the time when a new regulation comes out, I get heartburn. I sit there and my job is to wear a tinfoil hat all day long and try to figure out threats that are coming to the business. And so a lot of those threats are internal threats from a security standpoint. Humans are messy, governments are slow. And so when it comes to business, it's about survival. And when it comes down to being able to deliver something to the market, that is really important. And a lot of times the regulations have a negative perspective. But there are very positive outcomes that are for regulations. And I'm going to use analogies here because most of my life is deeply technical, but I explain it in risk-based scenarios. The problem with the cybersecurity world in general is it's a lot of technical people not understanding risk. And they can't actually explain that to a C-suite or to a board or to investors. And so if you tell your boss something, why do you care? So for me, from a regulation, when it comes through, it becomes more difficult for me, especially in a global company, to be able to comply with a regulation if I don't understand the intent. And half the time I have to go onto a website, I have to read what is being pushed out, I have to read news articles. Forums like this, I can actually talk to a regulator and get intent without essentially going on the record and being able to figure out what are you trying to accomplish. And a lot of times businesses are already doing these types of risk practices, otherwise they wouldn't be in business. And so from a pragmatic standpoint, it becomes harder when you have to comply with over 25 different frameworks globally. And so from a security standpoint, each one is different, but the intent generally is the same. And so how do you actually translate a security control to an aircraft in flight that crosses 14 countries and 2 oceans? And so our aviation industry is completely different because sovereignty is essentially relative. Is the citizenship of the person on the aircraft important? Is the data they're accessing important? Is the region that they're working on? And with SATCOM, which ground site am I actually connecting to? So from a regulatory standpoint, it depends all the time. And when it comes to penalties, penalties are almost always after the fact. Compliance is a baseline. That's not security. That is something I must do. Security for us when we secure our customers globally, because our mission is the customers, our goal is to make sure that when you get on the airplane, that you don't step back in time and you have to put your phone in airplane mode in order to not be connected to the world. Sometimes it's a feature and not a bug, and other times you're a business aspect and you want to continue the business. So regulation is important for us to be able to enforce minimum standards, but when it comes to security, my attack surface changes every single second, every single day. And so my risk isn't static. Okay. It continuously changes. And so I view regulation as positive unless the intent is not clear.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So, recalling what you said, one difficulty for companies that they do not face one single rule book. So they face NIS2, national cybersecurity laws, the Cyber Resilience Act, the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, sectoral aviation or telecom obligation, and now the EU Space Act proposal. So the risk is not only non-compliance, it is confusion. So I would like to ask to Laetitia to briefly explain. So when a company asks which rule applies to me, what is the right way to approach the answer? So should they start from the legal entities, their service, their customer, the infrastructure they operate, or the risk they create? So try to be synthetic and strict with this. Thank you.
It's an interesting question because when the rules apply, it's not only to a single company, it's to the entire ecosystem, right? So, for instance, a directive like NIS2, it does not create specific confusion. At least that's not the goal. The goal is to create minimum requirements for the protection of the systems. And so you know that you comply with it because your states transposed, implement it in their national law in a specific way based on their own national interests. And if you comply with these rules, you know also that your partner, your supplier, your customer are also compliant. Because at the European Union level, you want this compliance. You want legal predictability. You want this predictability because the business is not something that you can foresee necessarily. The geopolitical tensions is not something that you can foresee necessarily as well. So you want at least to know where you stand and where your different partners stand as well. And this is the reason why these different legal instruments, of course, needs to be well articulated together without confusion, but that's what the lawmakers aim for at the national level, at the regional level. This is something very important to keep in mind because we tend to speak about legal aspects in a way that as if it was a burden on company. From a legal perspective, I'm happy when my clients, they anticipated the risks that can be very accidental and very difficult to foresee, but they foreseen it in a preventative manner instead of being only in the reactive mode, because when you are just reacting, you lose a lot of money, and if you are in front of the judge, you want to show the judge that you acted preventatively and you were a prudent and reasonable actor when you did your business. So that's a few points that I wanted to underline.
Thank you very much. So resilience, as you said, is now one of the central words in the regulatory and strategic discussion, but in practice it can mean very different things depending on where you see it. So you could be a policymaker, a satellite operator, a connectivity provider, or a legal advisor. So I would like to make this concrete, more concrete. So I would like to pose this question to General Bauer. So for an operator such as Eutelsat, what does resilience mean in operational terms? Is it redundancy, sovereign control, cyber defense, crisis procedures, supply chain assurance, customer prioritization, or something broader? I know it's very difficult, but try to be concrete.
It's not difficult, it's everything. Everything you quote.
I know.
And the difficulty is here. There are many, many places where you can have a weakness and to handle the consequence of this weakness. So what is the resilience? Because the technical redundancy is a way, but when you have cyber attacks, the first object is attacked, you have a great chance that other assets will be attacked the same. If you cannot protect the first one, you will not protect the second one the same way. So you have to be resilient on the software, on the hardware, and on the organization. Organization means that you have to get in your company people which are aware of the great weakness of their responsibility, and to apply the rule, to apply an organization. That's where I'm fully agree with you on the way we have to address the issue. We are not addressing the issue by just clicking the box of all the regulation. As you said, in Europe, 27 different models, even if the first one, NIS2, is the same, at the end is 27 different forms we have to fill in. If you start to kick the box and just to correct the weaknesses detected during audit, you are just running after the train, and you will never join it. So for me, resilience is just to have a strategy, a clear strategy, a clear governance, and then if this first step is done, the regulation will just be a consequence.
Okay, thank you. So I will shift to Nick again. So in aviation connectivity, service continuity and trust are essential. So it's probably no. How do you think about resilience when the service depends on aircraft system, ground infrastructure, satellite link, cloud services, and customer network? So it's a lot of things to care about. So can you briefly explain?
Yes. So from an aviation standpoint, we're multi-orbit, so we deal with not just LEO, but we also deal with GEO services and air-to-ground in the United States. So when we look at resiliency, that means there's a lexicon in Europe, there's one in the US, there's one in South America. That word means different things to different people. So from a resilience standpoint, the way I would break it down in simple terms is you can take a punch and you can continue to deliver whatever mission outcome you want. If you're servicing a government entity, a lot of those missions are no-fail, but other times you're just ensuring that people on an aircraft can surf funny cat videos, right? Yeah. Not every mission, not every data set is as critical as defending a nuclear weapon being launched. And so when it comes to the ability to deliver an outcome for connectivity and resilience, we look at the ability, financially, there's service level agreements, and here's the connectivity. If we don't deliver a connectivity, we cut you a check, right? There's the financial aspect. But when it comes to resiliency for us, it's about achieving the outcomes for the customers. They're on the aircraft for a reason. They're going from one place to another. The goal is to continue their connected environment for business purposes, personal purposes, or government purposes. We don't discriminate. We treat the system itself from a data standpoint, and I really want to make sure that's important. We don't think about it from a network resiliency standpoint. The data is the most important thing. I don't care if it's artificial intelligence. I don't care if it's customer data, corporate data. Data sovereignty and how data is treated, curated, is really important because that's what you're accessing. That's what you're sending. That's what you're using to make a decision. Our goal is to create a decision advantage for our customers by having the connectivity while they're in the air. And we connect to many different constellations. And so the challenge that we'll run into when it comes to resilience is we rely on the resilience of the connected ecosystem, not just the aircraft. So we have partners throughout the world that give us connectivity no matter where we're at, to include cloud. We have data centers all over the world. We have cloud connections all over the world. So we'll route information and data to achieve the customer outcome while also trying to be as compliant and regulatory focused as possible. Unfortunately, when you deal with the reality when it comes to resilience, the internet is an unregulated space.
Exactly.
Right? And so when you connect people to the internet, if you're not talking about a defense or government application, that is a different level of metric that you have to pay attention to. And so you incur the risk of that customer whether you wanted to or not. And so it's about taking that risk and reducing it to ensure resiliency is more than just a word, and it enables somebody to create an outcome when they're doing anything on an aircraft or even when they land and transition from one country to another.
Exactly, unless you are a state like China, Russia, which internet is strictly regulated, obviously. So I jump again to Nicolas, and I would like to ask you a brief reflection, very brief. So as technologies such as quantum and advanced AI evolve, do you think Europe is moving toward a sufficiently integrated model of cyberspace and strategic technology governance, or is the regulation still adapting more slowly than the threat landscape?
Yeah, it's let's say a usual things that we say about regulation, that it moves too slow and and doesn't go deep enough. I saw, for example, the first person that was there sitting in my seat saying that actually the AI Act was a disaster because it was not actionable. But I think actually you basically capture what the regulation needs to do, let's say very properly, must be manage externalities necessarily, be technology neutral in order to avoid sticking too much to the technology and let the proper way of innovation, simple and actionable. And if you have all of these four elements, then actually I think the regulation can be good. And it is the four conditions are absolutely necessary. With regard to the Space Act, when we come to that, I think actually I'm a little bit biased about that, but I think we managed to do that because the purpose actually everyone understands it's now actually it's not cyber is not, let's say, from ages there. With regards to the, let's say, the rules themselves, we have something that actually, let's say, does not come either out of the blue. Multiple regulation already existed. Adapting for space was not so much difficult. And with regard to the technology neutrality, but you will let me know in the future if we are really...
I think that, I mean, we should be more proactive in the future rather than we are now. I mean, less predictive and more proactive, because we are facing models, for example, like ChatGPT 5.5 or Mythos that are able to implement several attacks in the same time. So I think it's quite difficult to comply with. So now let's move to the last section of this core part of the conversation, which deals with incident reporting and crisis coordination. So one of the most concrete changes under modern cyber regulation is the expectation to report, coordinate, and document incidents. But in space, incidents can be technically complex, cross-border, commercially sensitive, and potentially linked to national security, most of all. So I'm asking again to you, Nicolas, how should the space sector think about incident reporting? What level of maturity does Europe need so that the reporting supports collective resilience rather than becoming only an administrative burden? So maybe a coordination with the NISA, something like that, so more coordination with the European institution. So what do you think about that?
On this, actually, if you have a look specifically on the SpaceSat, it's the sole thing that we did not touch. The incident reporting, we applied 100% the one of the needs, because we believe that the one of the needs fulfill the needs. And we need to remind what is the objective of reporting. And actually, there are two folds. The first one is basically managing the consequences with, let's say, very often, let's say, commercial industries that, let's say, do not have the skills to manage important incidents, especially when you are talking about space-sponsored actors. Let's say you need to bring on the table very specific skills to solve your problem, and very often these skills are within the administration, of course, also on the commercial sector. And on this, I would tend to say that the reporting to national authority makes the purpose, I would tend to say. On the other side, actually, one of the key importance of incident reporting is also to collect intelligence in order to make sure that this information can prevent the same attacker to attack other actors. And on this, I think actually the problem is not necessarily the reporting, but what we do with this information we collect and how we can make sure that the network of these authorities work sufficiently
more coordination with
coordinated in a coordinated for that purpose, to make sure that all the actors that could consume an information that is relevant for them got access to that.
Okay.
And these are, for me, let's say, the two major points of incident.
Thank you very much. So let's shift again, let's remain in the legal and policy framework. A question to Laetitia. What are the legal tensions around the incident disclosure? For example, timing, evidence preservation, contractual confidentiality, customer notification, and interaction with public authorities. So can you explain which is the biggest risk for these? So just point one or two.
So I second to what Nicolas just said regarding the external publicization of the risks, to a certain extent also, because exchange of good practices, exchange of what went wrong and what went right in reacting is extremely important, because then these lessons learned become best practices. So from an external point of view, it's extremely interesting. At the same time, some companies will see it as a reputational damage. So they will consider that because they publicize this in a way that their customers were aware, they can lose customers, lose partner. But we see that in the case of cyber events, there is no zero risk. Every single company can face either an intentional threat, because also of geopolitical risk, geopolitical tensions, or an accidental risk, because
there's no if, but
they
when.
They can be glitches.
Yeah.
At the legal level, when we have a company that comes to see us and we start discussing what could be put in place, we sometimes realize that the organizational scheme inside the company is not well known, even at the top level. IT people don't necessarily speak to legal people. They don't necessarily speak to engineers, especially in very big companies. you don't know exactly the entire architecture of, who has which computer, who did the latest update, who did the latest patch or the latest training. Do you know all of your colleagues? And if there is an issue that you faced because you clicked on a link on an email or similar issue, do you know who is the point of contact to refer to? Exactly. So one of the points of NIS2 and other regulations, I must say, is to have a good organizational scheme so you know who to refer to if there is an issue and you know where the potential weaknesses can be, because a weakness can become a vulnerability. A vulnerability can be exploited and it can affect your entire mission. And this is what you don't want to, because this is what caused the reputational damage. If it happened, it happened. So in any case, it won't be good. And hiding it won't do any good, because you will not be a trustworthy actor if you hide what happens really to you.
Thank you, Laetitia. So now again to General Bauer. So I would like to ask you, in a real crisis, how do you balance transparency, national security, operational secrecy, and customer communication? It's kind of $1 billion question, but I will ask you to answer in 1 minute, 1 minute and a half of this. Okay, I think it's difficult. But
the first thing we don't discuss at all is transparency. We have to be transparent because we have no choice, especially when you are delivering a service. It's very, very difficult to hide that you have a difficulty and something is going wrong. What is at stake is the timing of the transparency. First, the regulator, because they will help you, most of them. There is no, you have most of the time 72 hours to declare. I think it's a good lapse of time just to, for the first analysis, just to know if it is a cyber incident or something else. Sometimes it's something totally different. It could be a technical incident. You need this part of time, which is never very clear. Sometimes you are just declaring an incident because it could be a cyber incident, but you have to do it. Hiding is not the solution, will never be the solution. The second stage will be, depending on the customer, of course, a governmental services is not the same than a commercial one. The consequences are not the same. Maybe it's more severe for a company like Eutelsat, the commercial part, but we have some level of confidence with our governmental clients, which is higher. And we know that the targets of the one who are just attacking us is more could be more severe on the governmental issues than on the commercial issues. So transparency always. Okay. So, but when you declare, when you reveal, could be different and adapted.
Yeah, thank you. So a question to Nick again. From the CISO perspective, what needs to be prepared before an incident happens so that regulatory reporting does not become chaotic during the crisis? So.
Absolutely. I think the way I would phrase it is you want to ensure that during a time of crisis, that's not the first time you've actually done incident response. So whether it's a tabletop exercise that you should do every year, a lot of frameworks mandate every 12 months. We do a continuous evaluation on our side. We're constantly involved with the board. I speak with the board every quarter. I deal with the C-suite every single day. And so when it comes down to risk, being able to explain it, but to the general's point, when it comes down to an event or a risk, if you can detect something in your environment, that is a different level of transparency because you can see what actually occurred. It may be an event, it could be an incident, and those words mean things, especially on the regulatory and legal framework. And so transparency must come with understanding. And so if it's from an outside entity, the company spends a lot of time trying to validate that information to see if it's actually correct, so we can actually diagnose what the issue is. Half the time, breaches are notified months later when there's a data breach elsewhere from a third-party supplier and you had no idea that you were breached. And so those are the challenges that a commercial company will face. But we have partnerships already with federal governments in every single country that we operate in. So transparency directly to the government is very quick. When it comes to the market, it depends on several different factors. One, if it's a regulatory tripwire that we have to respond to, that's one thing. If it is a customer contract that is in violation, we respond differently. So there's a lot of actions that occur behind the scenes, but having an effective incident response plan that covers almost any crisis with the same group of people, with policies and templates that have already been pre-built, so that way you're not trying to figure out what the issue is in real time.
Yes, thank you. So let's move to something very concrete, contracts. For instance, a regulation often becomes real through procurement clauses, security requirement, audit rights, liability provision, incident notification timelines, and supplier obligation. So I would like to pose only 2 questions in this round. So the first one is to Laetitia. What are you seeing in contrast today? Are space and connectivity customers becoming more demanding on cybersecurity clauses, auditability, liability, and evidence on compliance? And then for General Bauer again, for a satellite operator, supply assurance is critical. What should operator expect from their industrial partners and service provider? Secure by design, continuous monitoring, certification, rapid patching, or transparency? Laetitia, you go first, please.
So this is not an easy question because in terms of cybersecurity measures, there is no one-size-fits-all. Depending on your the type of mission you're using, even if the objects, the space assets can be similar, this is the type of mission is what matters because it can be very strategic, because the customers that you are serving are extremely important or essential in the functioning of societies. It can also be like specific commercial actors that have their own customers that are millions of clients using, for instance, satellite connectivity. We can speak of on-the-go connectivity for maritime and airplanes company. So there is no one-size-fits-all, so you have to do your best to use the best standards and the best measures internally, but also you have to keep in mind that you have to have a collaborative approach. It's not because one company is your competitor that potentially they cannot be of good advice because they faced same issues or similar incidents in the conduct of their own activities. Okay. So my 2 points will be, try to fit what is expected from you to the type of missions that you are conducting. Okay. And the second one being, try to have a collaborative approach because the competitors of today can be the collaborators of tomorrow.
Thank you very much. General, please.
So asking for subcontractors to be a rapid patching or certification and a lot of requirements is a solution, but if you're not able to control that they're effectively applying all the requesting you are asking for, there is no need. For me, the best solution, because we don't have the means to control hundreds of subcontractors. We have the responsibility, for sure, that's clear, but if we don't have the means, we can do nothing. The only solution for us is certification. When you ask for a certification, you know that you have people who are here to control and to have this minimum level of good organization, good practice, and you can rely on it. And you don't need to control by yourself. So I know it's difficult, especially for the small subcontractors, to apply for a certification. It's a cost, but it's an initial cost. As soon as you reach a good level, maintaining the level is not so difficult. Exactly. And it's the easiest solution for the subcontractors and for us.
Once you get, for example, ISO 27001, I mean, it's done. So I think that
if you start with that, you already have the minimum level. Yeah, and then you try to improve.
You got even more business opportunities because you are more competitive to the market, because you are compliant. So, to close, I would like to ask each of you one of concrete recommendation, very brief, just 1 sentence or 2. Imagine you are speaking to a space company, operator, manufacturer, or service provider that wants to prepare seriously before all details of the EU Space Act and national interpretation are fully settled, but does not know where to start. So let's start with Nicolas. What is the one policy signal companies should not miss?
Yeah, well, actually, let's say my suggestion and my advice for the company is to have a look at the Space Act, and to go, more importantly, to go beyond the first impression of yet another piece of policy, and to see, let's say, what is the content of it and what is the structure and how it brings really added value on the 3 points that I was mentioning before. So fragmentation, it will be really solving a lot of problems in particular for companies that have a large footprint in multiple countries. The second is the level playing field, so competitiveness. Cyber will become a criteria for competitiveness, and then simplification.
Thank you. Then to Nick, what is one operational security capability every organization should prioritize? The first one that you jump into your mind.
The first one is risk, and I've talked about it before. So 25 years prior, before becoming a CISO, I was in the U.S. military, and so from a risk standpoint, you expect what you inspect. And so whether it's suppliers, whether it's the government, what are you willing to enforce? There are plenty of laws and regulations that are applicable, but which ones are you willing to put financial and personal and intellectual capital behind? And those are the trust barriers that you need to overcome. Government is easy. Customers are hard. And so each one of them has their own varied opinion. So if you're going to do business in a multifaceted industry, you're going to need to be able to understand the risk calculations of each one of those so you can serve them in a pragmatic way. Saying that you're just going to comply with every single framework is unobtainium most of the time. So it depends on which one you're willing to enforce, the timing, the criticality of the mission, the data that you're supporting, and your business model going forward.
Yeah, thank you. So last question to Laetitia. What is the one legal or contractual action companies should take now? So the first one, the most important.
The most important is to have the number of a good lawyer in your contact list, either to ask a short advice or to help you overcome with your difficulties.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, General, what is the one resilience measure that is still underestimated?
A good internal organization and responsibility sharing between IT, cyber, engineering, lawyer, compliance, if you have a compliance entity in your company, who is in charge of what? Then the second point, priorities. But priorities is just joining the risk you assess.
So thank you very much to everyone. So let's give a big round of applause to our panelists, please. And now I strongly encourage to pose questions to those people, because we have a very different layer of expertise, and then it will be very interesting even for both an industry, both for a policymaker or maybe a legal entity and so on. So if you have any question, just raise your hand or just use the app. Otherwise, I can have some questions again, so for them. So basically, for Laetitia, I would like to ask, as commercial actors become increasingly central in the space ecosystem, how should legal accountability evolve in case of cyber incident involving complex supply chains, outsourced infrastructure, cloud-based services, software vendors, and commercial on-the-shelf suppliers? So this question could be extended even to Nicolas if we want. So please, Laetitia.
If I may, I will just second what General Bauer just said regarding the good distribution of accountability, because if you know who to refer to, you are able to anticipate more quickly. I will also agree with what Mr. Goddard just said regarding exercises. So tabletop exercise can be a bit strategic, but at the same time, you want to know how you are going to react as an entity if there is an issue. And you want to know how your partners are going to react as well and how you can work well together. And this helps. And then from a legal point of view, you will know also how to better negotiate your contracts, because you will have your priorities clear. And this is what you want based on the type of missions, as I said before, because if you conduct a strategic mission or if you want an institutional contract or a governmental contract, it costs a lot and it involves a lot of accountability and a lot of responsibility, but for good reason. For good reason, because you have a great role. And this is how space is important, and this is the reason why cyber hostile operations and cyber risks must be anticipated better. Nicolas, maybe?
Nicolas, please.
Yeah, from the policy-making perspective, I would tend to say that actually the question is not answered. Let's say it depends of where you are, and it's really, let's say, to the policy-making to identify whether actually put all the burden on one single actor, which is quite strategic, because he will be able to manage and organize his own supply chain in order to ensure the accountability of it. For the Space Act, it's the case. For example, we put, let's say, the burden on the operator. Most of the requirements are on the product. For sure, the product will go to the provider of the product. They will be percolated through contracts to the provider of the product. So we do not need to do much on that. But we need also to see, let's say, in the supply chain, if we have one of the actors that actually has, let's say, a bias, a legitimate bias to not do anything. And in that case, you need to have a piece of legislation to solve it. And this is, for example, in cyber, we have the case of the CRA, because basically we say, no, the editors of software have a responsibility with regard to the management of vulnerabilities. They cannot let it to their customer as before, because they have a strong bias on that. They can, let's say, reduce the cost, while actually they put all the risk in to their customers, which is not acceptable anymore. So let's say this is the beauty, I think, of the of the policy making, is to understand where actually this bias exists and where this externality exists.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, wrapping up our conversation, I would like to emphasize that basically we had very different persons that are working and influencing a lot of sectors, the legal one, the policy one, and the operational one. I think that all these sectors should cooperate to have a better resilience, because from the policy side to the legal side to operational side. And then one of my, takeaway from the experience that I have in the space sector is that even the more technical people, the scientists, let's say, should cooperate more with the policymakers, because we have to understand better one with each other, because we are dealing with very technical questions. And it's very paramount, in my opinion, to understand which is the risk, as Nick pointed out, because some people are not aware of the implication of the externalities, for example, of a data breach. That might impact, as a general highlighted, the security and the national security. And then, at the same time, try to be compliant, and as Nicolas and Laetitia just explained us in a very good way. So, I thank you all, the audience, and please let's give another big round of applause to our panelists, and thank you very much for having taken part to this conversation. Thank you very much. Bye.